Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. Thank you for watching Alaska weather with us tonight. As always, on this May 9th, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information at 1-800-472-0391. You can find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, where you will find a lot of the same images from the show that you watched tonight online. As we go through the overnight hours, some of those will start to fall off as we replace that with more up-to-date information for you. Remember, you can always get this show on YouTube as well from our partners over at Alaska Public Media that share this across the state with you no matter where you're watching from tonight. Simply go to AKwx TV on the YouTube search bar and then subscribe, and that'll alert you that the new show is ready to be watched. That usually happens around 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the evening every night, all year long. If you can't find what you're looking for, simply head to david.snider@noaa.gov. The email is a great way to find me, and I'm happy to serve you any way I possibly can. A couple things going on tonight. South Central is looking at wind as Kodiak is looking at a low pressure system that's deepening tonight. Some pretty strong winds out of the marine areas, Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet. And as we go ahead through Friday and into Saturday, that wind's spreading northward. So for Friday and Saturday, wind advisories are already posted for the Denali area, the eastern Alaska Range, and the Dehne and Tanana Flats region. It looks like this is going to have some gusts on the order of 50 to 60 miles per hour. So if you're driving through any of the passes, we're certainly planning to fly through any of the regions, especially if you're coming and going from the Valdez fly-in, you'll want to make sure that you've got a good handle on the steering wheel or a hand on the yoke there. It looks like things are going to be a little bit bumpy, certainly for aviation concerns, but also just for driving around. So the passes will be the worst, 50 to 60 miles an hour there. The other part of that is that fire weather danger will be worsening, and so right now a fire weather watch has been posted for the Deltana, Tanana Flats region as well as the eastern Alaska Range due to the increasing amount of wind and the expected drying that will occur on the downslope side of that, or on the north side of the higher terrain. Now, as we look out toward McGrath and around the Bristol Bay region, fire weather concerns haven't reached quite that level yet, but they are drying out a little bit, so we've painted those in there as well as higher fire danger regions. Now, it is Thursday, and as such, we'd like to give you a River Watch update from our friends over at the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. As conditions continue to go through the season and we mush a lot of this out, chances are we will have more updates for you, so stay tuned for that. First, let's go over to Scott Lindsay. Scott?
Good afternoon. My name is Scott Lindsay. I'm a hydrologist at the River Forecast Center of the National Weather Service in Anchorage, Alaska. I'm here to talk about breakup. Breakup is progressing nicely. It's been mild so far, and we expect that it will continue that way. Talk a little bit about snow. We have a map here from April 1st still from the Yukon Territory, which showed low snow. Just today we got a map, an update of the snow for May 1st. You can see that the AKwx Basin is still above normal, and northwest Alaska is very much above normal still, but the rest of the state is below normal, and snowmelt is progressing nicely. Looking at ice conditions, this is as of early April, which was the last time in most places where it was safe to measure ice. We had a warm winter, and the ice thicknesses reflect that. You can see Bethel was at 16% at the beginning of April, and Bethel went out, broke up very early. The rest of the state is likewise, and that has added to the reduced threat of breakup. Again, we just should remember ice safety. We've had a number of fatal accidents with people falling through the ice, and we encourage people wherever they are, however much it still seems like it's winter, to please be safe when you travel on the ice that's left. We got some precipitation this week that has caused cloudiness, which is causing breakup to go slowly. And when breakup goes slowly, that's a good thing. Breakups that are a result of sudden changes in temperature are when we have problems, but that's not been the case this year. You can see we do have some continued warm up starting in western Alaska, and if we were to look at this, it's going to spread across the state, but it's not the kind of warm up that we saw in years like 2009, where we had 70s and tremendous breakup flooding. Longer term, same pattern. Western Alaska stays warm, central, less chance to be warmer than normal, but still likely to be warmer than normal. And south central is most likely to be normal temperatures. Spring flood potential, this map we created in the early April, and it's held very, very nicely. We have a low threat of flooding throughout the state, a little bit elevated in places where we had high snowpacks, particularly the Koyukuk and Kobuk basins, and those areas are just starting to see snow melt, and we expect that in the next week breakup will occur there. Again, there is a potential for minor flooding from snow melt. This video we got from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Lauren Oliver and Robert Federick. Appreciate that. This was yesterday in Galena. You can see the ice move, and it's very impressive. The entire sheet of ice is moving, and that's always quite a treat to see. Water levels are low in Galena. There's very little opportunity for a jam that would cause flooding. They will see some rise in water levels as the ice moves by, but at this point we see a low potential for flooding in Galena. Looking at our breakup dates, we started really early and we've stretched over a long period of time, and that's ideal for a mild breakup. You can see these dates starting at the end of March in Nikolai, and have proceeded to march in various places across the state. There's not much rhyme or reason. We've had breakup at both ends of the Kuskokwim before the middle. There's breakup occurring in the middle Yukon and the lower Yukon at the same time right now. This shows our breakup map. You can see that there is still ice in place up in the upper Yukon, below Circle, up to Fort Yukon, and then still in place ice in the Yukon River Canyon. The lower Yukon, Marshall and Pilot Station and Mountain Village has already seen ice move, so we don't expect the kind of progressive breakup that has caused tremendous flooding in the past. We will have a River Watch team going out into the field. Starting tomorrow to the Middle River. They will be in Tanana, Galena, Ruby, and then also up in the Koyukuk Basin to monitor flood potential there. If you need more information, please see our website at weather.gov/APRFC. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Let's take a look at the satellite picture, and you can see low pressure is working its way northward and quickly developing into a stronger system south of Kodiak Island, blowing a lot of that moisture northward into south central. A lot of that crossing the higher terrain of the Alaska Range is drying out, and you can see that northerly flow working its way down across the western Bering. We still have a broad northerly flow working its way into northwestern Alaska. That is going to continue warming things up and ensuring that a lot more precipitation that's falling in northwest is going to be a lot more liquid than frozen. That's also going to have some impacts on the ice in the region. For right now, southeast, under the effects of high pressure, has been seeing some sunshine and looking at areas of fog. The fog tonight and tomorrow probably won't be as bad as what you've already seen, so improving conditions there. Here's the low we're watching right now across the western Gulf at 1,002 millibars. It is strengthening. It's already produced some periods of heavy rain around Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, high pressure ridge right here across southeast, and the leftovers of the last system still marking some warmer air working across the interior. And then we have these other areas of low pressure out across the west that aren't terribly significant, but they're all part of the system. The main core of low pressure, though, is working in the north and western Gulf down to 987 millibars. You can see the front working its way across the Kenai Peninsula starting tonight, moving over places like Homer and then northward up toward Tyonek and through the Anchorage area as we head into the early morning hours. And that's going to set the stage for some wet weather around Prince William Sound and the northern Gulf, with areas of fog and light rain possible closer to southeast, and warmer air moving northward through the interior with snow showers across northwest. As we get into tomorrow, we expect to see winds coming up across the region. A high wind watch has been posted for the Anchorage area. We expect gusts on the hillside approaching 60 to 80 miles per hour on the western side. Probably looking at about 30 to 40 miles per hour tops, probably not a whole lot stronger than that. High pressure sitting across southeast will continue to push most of the moisture across the northern Gulf, but we're also going to see winds coming up across the eastern Alaska range, the Deltana and Tanana Flats region out toward Delta, and then also into the Denali area. And that means two things. First of all, gusts in the passes could reach into the 50 and 60 mile an hour range Friday and into Saturday, but it's going to exacerbate fire weather concerns as we go through the period too, because winds will be drying out as they cross over that higher terrain and descend. So again, wildfire conditions are worsening in those regions, so a fire weather watch has been posted. And remember, your local burning should be carefully considered as well. Check with fire weather officials in your area before you do that. High pressure across the eastern Gulf will keep showers going across west, the interior, and light snow across the north. Southeast will end up on a fairly dry start to the weekend with some areas of fog, showers of rain and snow across the Bering Strait communities and into Norton Sound. A quick check of temperatures tonight show readings back in the mid to upper 40s for southeast, lower 40s for south central, southwest, dipping into the upper 30s there. Cooler from Macoriac and Nunivak Island northward into Norton Sound, close to freezing in some cases there. Kivalina looking at 36. Teens and 20s for the North Slope, Fort Yukon at 34. Fairbanks looking in the mid 30s overnight. Many locations west toward McGrath will hold out closer to 40. And a very warm day shaping up for Friday in the interior. You're looking at high temps back in the mid to even upper 60s. Eagle and Northway pushing 70 degrees, 20s on the North Slope. In the west, 40s and 50s. Nome at 44. Bristol Bay temps, King Salmon and Dillingham low 50s. Kodiak 51. Juneau nearing 60, 64 in Ketchikan.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to aviation now. IFR is expected to be fairly widespread around the Gulf Coast, and you'll see that spreading in especially to the Kenai Fjords region and Prince William Sound, Kodiak Island, and into Bristol Bay. Some areas in southeast will enjoy VFR to start. Marginal conditions will be lurking along the outer coast and creeping into some places like Stevens Passage. Look for marginal weather north of the Brooks Range and IFR conditions right along the coast and not quite into the Bering Strait, but marginal conditions should be fairly prevalent there, and IFR across the central chain and the northern Bering. You'll see some of that wrapping into southwestern Alaska and up the spine of the western Alaska range as we get into the afternoon tomorrow, with IFR continuing around Prince William Sound and the northern Gulf Coast and working its way into the Lynn Canal and down toward the capital city. Watch for convection across the interior, generally to the west of Fairbanks, it looks like. IFR conditions across the north coast, with MVFR pushing into some of your favorite northbound passes. Saturday morning, IFR will be fairly widespread again across the North Slope with areas around the Bering Strait and the west coast. Look for IFR conditions across the central and eastern parts of the chain and also around the Cook Inlet region, especially once again the Kenai Fjords region and up into western Prince William Sound. Cook Inlet may be flirting with IFR a little bit through the morning hours, but we do expect to see some improvement as we get into the afternoon. VFR continues across most of southeast. VFR expected across Cook Inlet, and then a wide swath of IFR stretching all the way into the Yukon Delta and across some of your Brooks Range passes into the Beaufort Seacoast by Saturday afternoon, with convection moving just a little bit further northbound. As we get into your pass conditions here, watch for Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass to remain MVFR through most of your Friday there. It doesn't look like we'll see any substantial lowering of that. And in the passes north of that, of course, IFR conditions will be more likely. And for Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see IFR really throughout the entire day, especially in the afternoon. Rainy Pass looks to be IFR mostly in the afternoon there. Windy Pass probably leans over toward marginal conditions as we go through your Friday. VFR to start in Isabel Pass, get moving quickly. Marginal weather develops as we go through the afternoon. Metasta Pass VFR. Teneda Pass also looks to be marginal, but the winds are going to come up throughout the day too, so it's not just a visibility impact for most of south central and southwest. Keep that in mind. Portage Pass expected to be instrument flight rule as we go through your day. And Chilkoot and White Pass also looking to be VFR to start, but as we saw, probably some lower conditions setting in as we get into the afternoon. Freezing levels indicate a pretty wide swath of warm air moving into southeastern Alaska into the interior. Levels there anywhere from 4 to about 6,000 feet, and then 6 to 8,000 feet as you move into southeastern Alaska, 10 to 12 across southern parts of the Panhandle. Out across the west, look for 2,000 feet across most of the Bering Strait communities. The surface freezing line just south of St. Lawrence Island, but north of and along of St. Matthew. And right along the spine of the Brooks Range, everything south of that again warming up thanks to the substantial ridge of high pressure that's been forming in the region. And because of that, icing potential is certainly there, but you're going to have to go a little bit higher to find that main corridor of higher icing potential. So we're talking about levels generally above 8,000 feet to 9,000 feet from south central to southwest. And for the interior, it's even higher than that, above 10,000 feet around the Yukon Valley and the Yukon Delta, and also across northern parts of southeast, so pretty high up there. Across the central and western chain, levels are a little bit lower as we're wrapping this around into the west side of the low pressure system there. So we're talking about 5 to about 6,000 feet for the central and western chain to reach isolated moderate threat. Low pressure sitting across the southern Bering and across southwest is really going to amp up the winds. At the jet stream level there, around 30,000 feet or so, you're looking at a very strong push coming in from the south at about 70 to 80 knots. And this is going to line up perfectly with the lower levels, which is going to help reinforce the entire weather package moving into south central. So gusty winds may reach considerable moderate tomorrow across south central, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound included, and maybe isolated severe. So keep that in mind as you're watching the maps. Low pressure sitting here across the eastern coast of Asia, driving in a much faster quarter of air, 120 across the northern Pacific, and then high pressure slowing things down across southeast, but you are getting an onshore flow around 80 knots. Here's 9,000 foot winds, onshore flow of 30 to 40 across southeast, across Prince William Sound. Winds coming in at 50 knots here to Prince William Sound, and then an offshore flow through the Bering Strait and into the chain anywhere from about 20 to 30 knots. At 3,000 feet, you can see winds moving in from the south across the north slope, easterlies across the Brooks Range, northerlies through the Bering Strait, westerlies across the Aleutians, and then a strong convergence and fast-moving air moving across south central, anywhere from 40 to 50 knots. Southwest working across, southwesterlies working across southeast, anywhere from 20 to about 30 knots. So once again, isolated severe possible across south central, below 6,000 feet. Considerable moderate, fairly widespread through the Susitna Valley and southwest, with areas of chop across the north.
The three little C's of spring.
Hey there, stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Plot Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. It's springtime and a great time to get outside at night and stargaze.
The stars and constellations of winter like Orion and Taurus are heading out, and new spring constellations are taking center stage.
Now, normally we cover the big, bold, and bright spring constellations like Leo, Bootes, and Virgo. But for this episode, we want to focus in on some tiny, sometimes hard to find and overlooked constellations.
And they all start with the letter C. We're talking Cancer, Corvus, and Corona Borealis. Okay, sure, Corona Borealis has a capital B in it, but still.
We'll show you how to find the three C's of spring.
Okay, we have our sky set up for May 10th at 11 p.m. facing west. We're going to start off looking for Cancer, the crab, and the stars, and it could be a toughie since its stars are faint and frankly it doesn't look much like a crab.
Luckily, we have a guide to help us. Cancer is a zodiacal constellation, and so the sun, moon, and planets sometimes pass through it. On this night, the moon is smack dab in front of Cancer.
How do you find it when the moon is moved away, like on the 11th and 12th? Traditionally, the outline looks like a sideways Y shape, but if you live in a city, those stars are tough to spot.
I use the brighter constellations of Leo up and to the left and Gemini down and to the right as guides. Connect the dots between the bright star in Gemini named Castor and the bright star in Leo named Regulus. Cancer is halfway between them.
So even if you can't see a crab up there, you'll know where he lives.
Next, turn to the south and about halfway up you'll find a small four-sided figure of semi-bright stars. It may take a lot of imagination to see a crow in these stars, but you found the constellation Corvus the Crow.
If you really have amazing imagination, you can see the crow riding on the back of a seven-headed snake called the Hydra with a cup of water named Crater just out of reach.
Yeah, let's stick with the four-sided figure for now. Corvus can seem a little isolated, but there is one bright beacon nearby. The blue star Spica is up and to the left of Corvus, and this marks the hand of Virgo the Maiden.
If you see Spica, it can point you to Corvus. And then you can see the Hydra and the cup and
Dean, no one has that much imagination.
Oh, sorry about that. I got a little carried away.
Finally, if you lie back in the grass and look straight overhead, you can find the third sea, and it looks like a half circle of 7 semi-bright stars.
This is Corona Borealis, the northern crown. If you have trouble imagining this as the crown of a beautiful woman named Ariadne, maybe it looks like a bowl, a rainbow, a smile, or a frown.
You might not notice it at first, so to find Corona Borealis, I like to start with the Big Dipper.
That's easy to find.
Connect the dots on the handle of the Big Dipper and follow that arc to the bright star Arcturus.
Follow the arc to Arcturus.
Then you found the kite-shaped constellation Boötes. Corona Borealis is to the right underneath the kite.
I think Boötes looks like an ice cream cone on its side, and in this precarious position, I can imagine Corona Borealis as the second scoop that tragically fell off.
Okay, now that I can see. I've dropped a second scoop of ice cream a few times in my life.
So, there you have it. Look for Cancer the Crab in the west, nestled between the brighter constellations of Leo and Gemini.
Then face south to find the little, four-sided figure of Corvus the Crow with Spica nearby.
Then look straight overhead to find Corona Borealis near the ice cream cone-shaped Boötes. Hey James, you thinking what I'm thinking?
Ice cream.
Exactly. Stargazing and ice cream in May are a winning combo. Keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with your marine weather, as we look at northwest, you can see a marginal ice zone is pretty much taking over the coastal areas of the Chukchi Sea and into the Bering Strait. And you'll also notice a little bit of higher concentration ice through the Bering Strait that's still there, wrapping around areas of low pressure. We've got warm air moving across the coastal areas and still dealing with colder northerly flow on the west side. As we head through the weekend, that's going to change and become more of a southerly flow, and so we will see more changes across the Bering Strait region as we go through the next few days. This is the latest from the Alaska Sea Ice Program. As always, you can check the ice forecast and the outlook anytime at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. On the southeast now, winds will generally be around 15 to 20 knots or so in the Lynn Canal, 4-foot seas, a southerly flow 20 knots, southwesterlies across Stevens Passage, northwesterlies in Clarence Strait and coastal areas. Still looking at a general onshore to northwesterly flow up toward Yakutat and into Prince William Sound, and east and southeasterly wind anywhere from 9 to 12 feet. On Saturday, a little bit more of an onshore push, but winds remain light, around 10 to 15 knots, seas holding around 8 to 11 feet. In the Lynn Canal, 25 knots from the south, of 5-foot sea, 15-knot winds around Stevens Passage and into Clarence Strait, 3-foot seas expected there on Saturday. Across the Gulf, winds are coming up, and we're still looking at some stronger gales and pushing into the 23-foot range there outside of the Kenai Fjords area and Resurrection Bay. Into the Barren Islands, you're looking at 30 to 45 knots. Northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet on Friday with 6 to 8-foot seas, 9-foot seas into the Barrens, and southeasterlies driving into Cordova and Prince William Sound, 30 to 40 knots, expecting 7-foot seas on the inside, up to 19-foot seas there on the outside. For Saturday, winds diminish. It looks like a better day, but we're still talking about an onshore flow into the Sound, so things will be sloppy and wet. 15 knots with 3-foot seas on the inside, southwesterlies across the northern Gulf, 10 to 12-foot seas on a 20-knot wind, and southerlies moving up Cook Inlet anywhere from 20 to 25 knots. We expect choppy conditions out there through the weekend. A westerly push coming into Bristol Bay will drive winds up to 25 knots, 6-foot seas there, 9-foot seas down the coast. It looks like we'll see more of a west and southwesterly flow coming through Shelikof Strait and east of Kodiak Island, 35 to 45 knots on either side, 11 to 21-foot seas there. On Saturday, a southerly wind continues inside of Bristol Bay and down the coast. You're looking at about 6-foot seas to the west, 8 to 9-foot seas as you head out toward Kodiak Island on Saturday. Southwesterlies on either side back to 20 knots, and southerlies will rule the roost across most of the southern Bering Sea coast with a 6 to 7-foot sea. Across the chain, we're still dealing with the effects of high pressure and generally weak areas of low pressure embedded in that. A west and southwesterly flow for the eastern chain, 15 to 20. 4 to 6 foot seas on either side across the central and western areas, and north and westerly flow from Atka all the way out to Kiska, about 5 to 7 foot seas there on a 15 to 25 knot wind. Across the region on Saturday, look for a west and southwesterly flow continuing. Look for about 20 knots around Nikolsky, and on either side 6 to 7 foot seas, 15 knots from Nikolsky to Unalaska, and west and northwesterly winds across the western chain. Across the west coast, northerly winds are still in charge, but remember we said southerly winds were developing. 25 knots inside of Norton Sound out around St. Matthew, down to St. Paul and St. George, where we get that gentle southerly flow developing. 10 knots and 3 foot seas there. Northwesterlies inside the Kuskokwim Delta could bring you about 6 foot seas. Now we start to see that change right there on Saturday with low pressure working up the west coast. Northerlies continue on Saturday, but several areas of low pressure are out there, and this flow should flip around as we get into Sunday and Monday. 15 to 30 knot winds though in the northern bearing on Saturday, 3 to 6 foot seas, and north and westerly south of St. Matthew 15 to 25 with 5 to 7 foot seas there. Across the Beaufort Seacoast, easterlies still working across the ice, 15 to 20 knots, north and easterlies over the marginal ice as we just saw, 4 to 5 foot seas there into Kotzebue Sound. Northerlies through the Bering Strait could reach up to 25 knots. For your Saturday, a north and easterly flow picks up just a little bit more. That could bring in a little bit more of that marine layer and that cold layer right up against the coast and keep visibility down in some cases. The seas are going to come up a little bit more across the Chukchi coast. Remember, that's marginal ice. There could be some pockets of open water in there, so be careful out there. 25 knots in the region, and again with 5 foot seas in the open waters. Northerlies around the Bering Strait coast there, 30 knots with a 6 foot sea. Recapping tonight's weather, low pressure's deepening around Kodiak Island. A 987 millibar low will push a front into south central. Most of southeast will enjoy a little bit of a clear sky, maybe some patchy areas of fog and light rain closer to the coast, and light snow showers in the north and west with generally showery conditions out in the west, but fair weather winds, let's say. Across southwest and south central, the low pressure system moves ashore on Friday, bringing in some heavier rainfall to the Gulf Coast and southwest. Look for winds to develop across the Alaska Range, especially the eastern side, with gusts of 50 to 60 miles per hour.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.